Hello, and welcome to the Confidence Academy podcast. My name is Lily Badcock, and I am a transformational confidence coach helping you to thrive in spite of anxiety. Each week, I will be sharing interviews with guest experts from around the world who have lived through their own experiences and who now help others to do the same. I will also be sharing the tangible steps you can take to start managing your own anxiety. It's my aim to reach as many people as possible with the message that no matter what you're going through, no matter what your struggle may be, there is hope, and there is a way to create an amazing life for yourself. The incredible people I've been blessed to interview are walking, talking examples of how this is possible, and I truly hope you will find their stories inspiring, uplifting, and motivational. The conversations are very open and candid and occasionally may include some adult language, so please take care when listening around little ones or grab some headphones. This podcast series is brought to you in association with Lily Badcock Confidence Coaching, offering private and group coaching to help you thrive in spite of anxiety. If you're ready to ditch the stress and frustration of battling anxiety every day, why not visit www.lilybadcock.com to see how I can help. There are free resources available to download and start using straight away, plus the option to sign up for ongoing coaching if you wish. Before we dive in, don't forget to leave a review for us on iTunes and to check out the links in the podcast notes to the free resources we have available for you. But for now, let's get you on your way to living your epic life anxiety-free. Because remember, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it. Hello and welcome back to the Confidence Academy podcast. And today I am joined by the gorgeous Harriette Hale. And I always say people are gorgeous and amazing and inspiring, but I always mean it, but I mean it even more today because the woman is stunning. And Harriette is someone that I've connected with previously. She's absolutely amazing. And she's actually the UK's leading money mindset coach and expert, and also a priestess of light, which I frigging love. Hello, Harriette.
Hi, Lily. Thank you so much for having me here, hon. Glad we finally made it.
I know, you're so welcome, and a fellow UK babe, which is even more exciting.
Absolutely.
So I'm actually sat in daylight for once. I usually do these things in the dark. So welcome to the podcast. And the intro that I just gave, obviously we touched on the fact that you're a leading money mindset coach, but actually the topic for today's podcast is the power of forgiveness. So we're going to delve into this. As with all of these episodes, we'll see where it goes. The conversation will lead us wherever it will lead us. But I think this topic is unbelievably important because it can relate to absolutely anything. So, you know, if anybody has a struggle of any description, you can bet your bottom dollar there's usually an element of forgiveness or an element of guilt or shame that they're carrying, which is compounding the problem worse. So I'm really excited to have you on, and hopefully it won't run for 7 hours, but it easily could. But you know, we're gonna crack on with it. So as I do with all of my experts, I would love you to tell the listeners exactly who you are and what all of that means, everything I just said. So, you know, what does being a money mindset coach mean? And especially a priestess of light, I want
to... Okay, sure, no problem. So actually a bit of background, I am just a musician. I trained at music university. That was always my passion, and I thought that was going to be my career. You know, we all start out on these things and they turn into something completely different. So at university, I set up my first business, which was in music. And then by my sort of early 20s, I was running several companies, very successful, turning high six figures, really doing very well. I was a cocky little madam, to say the least, because I thought I'd smashed life. And I guess my make or break moment, the thing that shifted my whole life from that point onwards, was when 3 of my employees, one of whom was actually my ex-boyfriend, decided to swipe the company from underneath me and they literally took the majority of my client base from me overnight and set up a competing company less than 1 mile away from where my studios were based. And I found out via social media, which was horrendous. It was horrific. So overnight, I literally went £54,000 down. And then in order to get myself out of that financial mess, I had to take out a £50,000 loan. So I was suddenly, literally overnight, £100,000 in debt with no clients, massive overheads, emotionally broke, spiritually broke, financially broke, just broke in every which way you possibly can be as a 20-something-year-old trying to make it all work in the big city. And it was at that point, I guess, forgiveness really had to kick in, because the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt, the hatred, the dismay, the disgust, the betrayal, all of those emotions that I was feeling at that time were not serving me. And all the people around me, my parents, my accountants, my solicitors, friends who had stayed loyal, just kept saying to me, Harriette, forget the whole thing, go for broke, go bankrupt, close all the companies down, just go get a job. You know, you're an intelligent girl, you'll be fine. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I kept trying to strive to rebuild this business. I kept thinking to myself, well, you know, I made it this far. The first 3 years worked really well. So I'll just rebuild it. It's not the end of the world. I'm still young. I'll do it. And I had so much vengeance in my heart that 6 months down the line, the same business strategy that I'd applied and was extremely successful the first time round just wasn't working. So I started to look at different options, different ways of making things happen. I then came across the law of attraction, which I'm sure many of your listeners know about. And I got more and more into money mindset and realizing that ultimately me and my energy was responsible for my success, and no kind of outward business strategy or kind of outward hustle or outward pushing and striving and stressing was going to make it work. So long story short, I went on this spiritual journey, discovering the law of attraction, discovering energy healing, discovering more mindset work, vibrational work. I then recently became established as the leading money mindset expert in the UK off the back of rebuilding my businesses to a very successful point, but then also being approached by other people saying, oh my God, you turned it all around. How did you do it? Will you coach me? Started business coaching, shifted that very quickly into mindset coaching. My spiritual path took me to an energy healing practitioner's course. I became an energy healer. Fell completely in love with the goddess energy, with all the healing, with how much the spiritual aspect of this part of life was massively influencing the success in my business life and my personal life. And so I became initiated as a priestess of light, which now means that I am working both in the spiritual realms and the energy realms, but then also as a coach and a money mindset expert to serve people who want to get out of their own emotional digs and transform their lives into one of service and purpose.
Amazing. So as with all of the guest experts, you have truly walked the path that you're now helping other people to walk. And it's so funny that we even connected because, and I know we had this conversation the first time we chatted because there was so many synchronicities, but I can completely relate to the story that you told about having the business and then having it swiped from under you. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened to me. And although it wasn't a business that was worth thousands of pounds or even hundreds of pounds, it was more, I definitely felt betrayed. And these were people that I trusted, some of my closest, mentors and friends. And I think it's something that has stayed with me for all of the years since it happened. And as much as I've tried really hard and I felt like on some level I have been able to move on from it, energetically, I've been very, very tied to the anger that came up at the time. And also it's just the fear of that ever happening again. And then the inability to let anybody else come close in that respect. Mm-hmm. So I know there'll be a lot of people listening. And obviously, this is a podcast. It's called The Confidence Academy. We're all about building confidence. We're all about dealing with anxiety. But I think a lot of people's anxiety comes from the fear that a scenario might repeat itself. And as I said at the beginning, you know, you may not have been treated badly by a person, or, you know, your story might not be quite the same as the one that Harriette's just told, but, you know, if you're experiencing anxiety on some level, you can bet your bottom dollar there's going to be forgiveness work to do, even if it's forgiving a part of yourself. So certainly in my experience, there have been times I've really beaten myself up because I made a decision, or because I did a certain thing a certain way, or in my perception I didn't step up like I should have done. You know, I think we're really good at beating ourselves up. And you know, it's been as much a lesson in forgiving myself as it has forgiving anybody else. And even, you know, even looking at how did I even allow that circumstance to come about? How did I put myself in a situation? And, you know, plenty of people would say, oh, you didn't put yourself in that situation, it wasn't your fault. And I get that on some level, but on some other level, I feel like energetically I allowed that to happen, or I opened myself up for that happening. And so a lot of the work I've been doing over the years has been, you know, forgiveness of people if I feel like they've, you know, treated me badly, maybe forgiveness for them. But the biggest thing has been forgiving myself. And, you know, and being like, it's okay that, you know, if you'd known better, you'd have done better. And that's the whole point, isn't it? And I think, you know, certainly even linked to the money mindset thing, you know, there's a lot of shame and guilt that can hang around money issues for people. But the same thing applies. If you knew any better, surely you'd have done better. Nobody would choose to, you know, consciously choose, that is, to do something that's going to put them in a horrendous situation. And yet we find ourselves in horrendous situations sometimes. So I certainly resonated with that, and hopefully people listening will resonate with it as well, even if the details are different. I think the core of your message is completely relatable, and I think so many people are going to relate to that. So I'm so interested in the energetic side of what you do as much as the physical side of what you do. And I know, again, there'll be people listening who maybe have delved far into energetic work before. They might be totally down with that. There are bound to be people listening who have no idea even what you just said. You know, that might be the first time they've ever heard and gone, wait, what? Spiritual realm? What is this? So maybe the first place we could start is to explain, how does that correlate? Because obviously we all know what our day-to-day life is like. We all know how it feels to go out day to day and have our human experiences, you know, real life that everyone experiences. What's going on energetically, and how could you explain that to somebody who maybe has never heard of that, or maybe they've heard of it but they don't really get it? How could you explain what you do to someone like that?
Okay, let's just relate it all to energy, because even scientists have agreed that the whole universe is made up of energy. I'm energy, you're energy, the conversation we're having is energy, the emotions we feel is energy, the food we eat is energy, the chairs we're all sat on, energy. Everything's made up of energy. So there are energetic relationships between all of us. We are all connected by energy matrices, if you like. So I work very much with the light grids. So if you can imagine, if we could see in a sixth dimensional sense, there would be literally grids of light connecting us all together. So we're all connected in some way, shape or form. And these light grids, the way that we're connected energetically, it's just the same way that we're connected by blood within our families. So when I do my energetic work, I'm able to see, if you like, and I say that in inverted commas because it's more like a sensing and a feeling, but I'm able to access the light grids, the energy grids that make up a person. So within our energy grids, we store our emotions, we store our past experiences, we store all of our feelings, including the ones of anxiety and depression and fear. We store our repeating patterns, we store our repeating behaviors. And so these energy matrices are accessed through the energy chakras. I don't know if any of your listeners will have heard of this. It's quite a popular topic that's coming out now. There are 7 main energy chakras in the body. And then we also have energy boundaries. So a bit like how you'd imagine the aura, I suppose. I'm sure people have heard about an aura. You know, it's been mentioned on movies and things. The aura is very much a real thing, but the aura is made up of 4 different energy boundaries. So as an energy healer, when you can witness these energy boundaries and the energy chakras, and for me specifically the energy grids, because I work with light activation, I can recalibrate, if I need to, the various energy points. I can remove certain energies, I can expand certain energies, I can activate certain energies. So it's kind of like a energetical MOT, you know? I go in there and I find out what's not serving your greatest highest good, and I rewire it for you, if you like.
Amazing. Yeah, actually I had something like this recently. I did actually work with an energy healer, and she didn't work so much on the grid side of things, but it was very similar work where she was going in and she called it muscle testing, and she was muscle testing my energy field, I guess. And I really liked it because I'm a huge advocate for hypnotherapy, and I've spoken about it on this podcast before. But one thing that always stresses me out slightly about anything like that is I consider myself a really strong-willed person, very strong-minded. So, for example, before I had any hypnotherapy, I wasn't convinced it was going to work, just because I thought, as much as I wanted it to, I just thought my mind is so strong, it's never gonna... We've got cat acrobatics in the background. That was amazing. That's so funny.
I'm so sorry.
No, I love it. Oh, I wish you guys could see this video. Harriette's got a beautiful cat, and right now, is it he or she? He is like doing knee slides. He's like Tom Cruise in that movie where he's in his pants and shirt. I love it. But yeah, so before I went for hypnotherapy, my biggest fear was that she wouldn't be able to get in because I would be so closed off, and you know, and I'm such a control freak. I thought, I'm just going to be able to control this. And actually, I'd had a hypnotherapy session years ago for my fear of spiders, and I just remember at the time thinking, I was conscious the whole time, and therefore I thought it wasn't working. So when he was saying, you know, oh, what colour is the spider? I was being stupid about it and going, oh, he's multicoloured and he's got a big bow tie that spins around. And, you know, I was having fun with this guy thinking, this isn't working, so I'm just going to have... But actually, I did overcome my fear of spiders right off the bat, but probably within, I don't know how much time passed, it wasn't much. And I went to Longley, which is a safari park near here. And they just so happened to be handing around a tarantula. And something in me just switched. And I thought, I reckon I could do that. And, I was somebody who would hyperventilate if I saw a spider through the window on the other side. Like, I literally used to be paralyzed with fear. You know, if I was in a singing lesson or any kind of professional environment, all profession would go out the window and I would just be like a blubbering wreck. I couldn't breathe. I'd literally hyperventilating. And so after that, I was like, maybe he got in. Like,
maybe it worked.
Yeah, in spite of all my thoughts. And so the thing I loved about the energy healing that I had was I had the same fear when we started to go through the process. I was thinking, oh God, this is going to be so embarrassing when it doesn't work. And, you know, what am I going to say? I felt under pressure because I thought she's going to ask me questions and I'm going to have to say answers and I'm not going to know. And actually with the energy testing, you don't need to do any of that. They just go in and do it, don't they? And she was reading the energy, she was asking questions, but then she was getting the answers and I didn't even have to say anything. And so it's the first time I'd had any treatment that I would class as full-on proper woo-woo. And I was saying to you just before how bizarre the energy, like my whole day, so many synchronicities happen, so many weird things that just never ever happen usually. And it was really, really exciting and really cool. So anyone listening who is hearing about this stuff for the first time, I just want to say, open your mind. And, you know, and if you've got fears coming up or things coming up that are going, oh, I think this is rubbish, that's fine. Like, let them sit there. That's your normal reaction to something when you haven't heard of it before. But I mean, the things that have happened to me since I had that have been utterly unbelievable. And, you know, and I'm someone, I like to think I am woo-woo, I am kind of spiritual, but at the same time, I'm very logical minded as well. I love to believe this stuff, but I also need to see that it works, and I need to understand it. So I feel like there's two halves of me, and you know, so I had to open my mind, and I kind of went through this process because I was just interested. I thought, wow, you know, I haven't done anything like that before. The lady that I worked with is going to be on the podcast shortly. So I thought, well, let's try her out and see what's what. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to say there's a few things that you said that I wanted to come back to. So the first thing was when you were speaking about the grids of light, you said that we're all connected. So the way that a family is connected by blood, we're all connected. And this is something I've heard time and time again. And anyone who's ever read any kind of mindset book or self-development book is going to have heard a similar thing.
Yeah.
So presumably then that means that when we have been through an experience that we deem to be negative, then somehow we are attached to that negativity, and we're still energetically attached to that person, because this is what came up for me. Like a lot of the issues I was having, and I hadn't even realized, but I had energetically attached myself to this negative experience. And so no matter how much I kind of wrote in my journal and did EFT tapping and, you know, said my affirmations every day and, you know, pep talks in the mirror and all the rest of it, I still felt like I was a bit stuck. And what you're saying makes, because it's almost something that it's deeper than we can just fix ourselves. It's not a case of just going and release and I'm done. You know, it's a deep energetic thing. So for somebody who, well, like I say, I think everybody listening is going to have had an experience of this, even if they didn't realize that's what it was. So how might somebody go about starting to sever those ties if they are tied energetically to something that is no longer serving them? What are some things that they could do to overcome that, or to start to work through those issues? Have you got any advice for people listening?
I do. And you're going to love this, Lily, because it's the topic of today. It's to forgive.
Yes. See what we did there? It's almost like
yeah, forgiveness is the absolute key. And here's why. Because we have, on the energetic spectrum, all of our emotions fit into the scale, if you like. So there is an emotional energetic scale spectrum that goes right from the very depths of fear through to anxiety, depression, anger, bitterness, resentment, to kind of, you know, a neutral emotion of just not being particularly anything, just numb, but then shifting up to being inquisitive, being inspired, being open, being available, maybe being happy, joyful, blissful, all the way up to love. So if you imagine this energetic scale, at the top end, alongside love, is forgiveness. In order for us to move up that energetic scale from anxiety and depression up to love, which is where we all desire to be, requires forgiveness. Forgiveness is like the bypass route to shift your energy. So when we are energetically tied to someone, and we call these energetic cords, yes, you can go see an energy healer and do a cord cutting, but ultimately what that energy healer will do is they will infiltrate their own forgiveness energy of some description to remove that cord. We have the power to heal ourselves. So many of us have forgotten our divine feminine power, and men have it as well, but it's the feminine side of us that is ultimately the forgiveness tool, this power. We all have the power to access that emotion. We all have the power to access forgiveness so that we can recalibrate, re-heal, re-energize our own energy matrix. Now, for us to truly, really forgive someone, it's more than just saying, oh, okay, well, I forgive you. It's really, truly feeling and stepping and tapping into that emotion of forgiveness and understanding why we must forgive them, understanding why they must be forgiven, understanding why the whole thing happened in the first place. And for me, that all comes down to universal truth. That comes down to your soul karma, your soul purpose, your life path. Understanding your journey to this point has all served a purpose that is far greater than your current human emotional experience of it. There's always a reason for everything. But when we are stuck in that suffering of anxiety and depression and hatred and bitterness and resentment and all those things, it's so hard to see the bigger picture. So this is really where we need to remove our ego. Okay, so I talk about ego and the soul in quite a different way to the way many people talk about it. Ego in, I don't know, the modern world, I suppose people talk about ego as, you know, brash and egoic and like really cocky and over the top, like egotistical. That's not what I mean by ego. Ego, for me, is the part of us, the human part of us that serves as our protection. So the ego is the part of us that stops you jumping off the edge of a cliff because it knows you will die. The ego is the one that stops you putting a hand on the stove. The ego is the one that stops you going for that promotion because that's scary, you know, and it's unknown. The ego is the one that stops you breaking out of a relationship because that's scary, that's unknown. The ego likes to keep us comfortable. The ego likes to keep us small. So when we are stuck in the vibrations, the lower vibrations of anxiety and depression and fearfulness and all the rest of it, it's our ego that ultimately stops us trying to break away from that, because we get comfortable in that energy. We get used to feeling that energy. And as much as we think we don't want to stay in that energy, actually the ego is so used to it, it's so comfortable there, that it's not allowing the soul to come through to access the energy of forgiveness. It is completely possible, but it's really understanding what's going on energetically within you so that you can truly access that forgiveness.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I think the topic of forgiveness immediately causes people to bristle up, because if they've had, you know, and like I said, I think we've all got parts of ourselves that we could work on forgiving if we really wanted to have a breakthrough. But there are probably everybody listening can think of at least one time where somebody has done something to them that they perceive was negative and that they think, you know, I can't forgive them for that because it led to X, Y, and Z. And so this topic of forgiveness, I found it previously whenever I've spoken about it, and specifically people who are quite deep in the depths of depression. So it's interesting what you said about the energetic scale, because I think the further down that scale you are, the harder it is to relate to the emotions that are at the top of that scale. It's so far away. And whenever I've brought the topic of forgiveness up in any kind of anxiety arena, or, you know, with anyone who is suffering in that way, it actually pisses them off more, because they think that forgiving means saying that what happened to them was okay, and, you know, and almost letting somebody off the hook. And we're so not prepared to do that. And the thing is, like, you could take a 3,000 foot bird's eye view of this and go, well, okay, but, you know, at the end of the day, if you want to be free and if you want to be truly happy and soul fulfilled, then isn't it worth just doing that? But the thing is, like you say, the human part of us, which for a lot of people is the most part of us, just can't allow it. No, because I went through that, and it, you know, and some people I know that, you know, people I know and people I've worked with have been through horrendous experiences, and they are not in a place energetically where they feel like forgiveness is something they can do. So, but we know that it is the path, it is the way to go, and it is necessary. So for somebody listening who maybe is feeling that way, so, you know, anyone listening who immediately just went, well, I could never forgive that person, or I could never forgive that circumstance. And it, you know, it might not be a person. I know people who are very poorly, and so maybe what they have to forgive is the fact that they've been given that thing to deal with in their life. There are people who have had very traumatic lives, not because of the negative actions of somebody, but maybe, you know, like I'm thinking maybe a parent who's lost a child, you know, they would find it so unbelievably difficult to have the concept of forgiveness. So how can we help those people? Because I think it's not always about expecting somebody to suddenly leap. Like, nobody expects you to leap from being in the deepest depths of depression to skipping on rainbows and, you know, sunshine lollipops and flowers. So how would somebody even begin to entertain the idea of forgiveness if that's where their thinking is based? I hope that made sense.
That does make sense. Yeah, the question I'd want to ask that person is, what are you making this mean?
Right.
What are you making this mean? Because all of our life experiences, we create stories and ultimately beliefs around these experiences. And those beliefs start to energetically embed in our grid, as I mentioned. And those beliefs and those stories and that grid then reforms our identity. And our identity dictates then how we run our life, how we think, what decisions we make, what actions we take. So I'd want to go right to the core of what we are making this mean. Are you making it mean that you are somehow not worthy? Are you making it mean that you aren't capable? Are you making it mean that you're just destined to have a really shitty life? And I can absolutely categorically tell you, nobody is destined to have a crap life. We all incarnated for the same reason, which was to have a human, physical, emotional experience. But ultimately, the end goal was always the completion and deliverance of a soul purpose, always. But we can get so bogged down in the story, and we can focus so much on all the stuff that's wrong that we don't even realize what it is that we're making it mean. So this is always my go-to. What are you making it mean? And the stuff that comes out of people is amazing. Oh, well, it means this. Oh, well, it means that. It means I can't. It means I won't. It means I mustn't. It means I shouldn't. And then I'll say, okay, says who? Who says this? Well, I said this. Okay. Well, then you can surely decide to change that story because it's your life. And then I give options. You know, what if we could move from, say, resentment and bitterness to expressed anger? This is just an incremental shift up that emotional scale. I'm not asking you to take one great big leap into rainbow and sunshine land, but can we shift that emotion into something that's slightly further up the scale? At least expressed anger is an energetic release. You know, from anger, can we then move into mourning? Can we move into grief? Can you honor your grief? I actually, you know, it's funny, I ran a workshop on the goddess gift last night. As part of the whole full moon, January full moon, goddess moon. And I was talking to the women there about how women and men suppress our grief so much. This is very much a conditioning of the time that we live in, is that we don't allow ourselves to grieve. We don't honor the process of mourning. And I'm not just talking about the death of a human being. I'm talking about grief in the way we feel and our reaction to our experiences. If we've been cheated on, if we've been betrayed, if we're suffering a bad experience, we don't allow ourselves to mourn through that process. And this mourning, this grief, this outpouring of sadness and regret is very much a part of the emotional journey. We have to move up that emotional scale to get to love. Yes, we can bypass with forgiveness, but you start making these incremental shifts up that scale, and you will naturally, organically fall into forgiveness. So it's really witnessing what those stories mean, and it's really honoring the emotions that you are feeling and allowing yourselves to feel those emotions without then creating another layer on top of yourself that says, well, I can't feel this, and I'm not allowed to feel that, and I'm not worthy of this, and I'm not able. And instead, I'm just going to sit in depression because I can't see another way out. Asking yourself this question, what are you making it mean, will force you to look at what are your options, and then many will be revealed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love what you said just then, because you said it right at the top that, you know, it's nobody's life purpose to come here and be sad. It's nobody's life purpose to come here and have a shitstorm of crap thrown at you and navigate. However, and I'm a massive believer in our challenges bring our lessons. And so each of us have, you know, and again, it's woo-woo and it depends what you believe, but I just think, let's just say, for example, that we've all come with a purpose and we've all come with a mission. I happen to believe that's true. So on the journey to that mission, we have almost set up for ourselves these experiences that we must go through in order that we can evolve, so that we are ready to then take on the next stage. So, you know, and you know, I can't speak for anyone other than myself, but this is how I came to terms with my anxiety and my journey with that, and everything that happened actually in the last however many years. Because I think, you know, and I bang on about this all the time, but it is a choice. And it's not always a choice. You don't always feel like you had a choice as to how you learnt that lesson. Certainly, you know, we get experiences that we we don't ever think consciously we would ever have chosen because they completely sucked. But, you know, we do have a choice as to what we make that mean, as you say. And it is, in the end, it is just the perception of that. And so somebody who is maybe currently in that place where they're just in that spiral or in that cycle of just going, oh, but, you know, it doesn't matter because every time I try to do something, I get flung back to this place. You know, I know there are loads of people, and I've described it before as being a bit like on a bungee rope. So it feels like you have a little breakthrough, and then the bungee rope snaps you right back, and you feel like you're right back to square one, and you're struggling again, and the same crap's coming up for you, and, you know, the same experiences. And I know people could relate that to their money story. They could relate that to their relationships, certainly. You know, how many people have toxic relationships that they are able to come out of only to get into another one and then find somewhere down the line that it's equally toxic, if not more. And it's almost like the lesson keeps coming back around. It keeps coming back around. But, you know, you still have a choice. You could, at any point you can say, well, I'm just an unlucky person. This is just my life. You know, I do this and then I do this and then that goes wrong and I'm back to square one. That in itself is a belief. So you can choose that, or you can say, what if I'm worth a bit more? And you touched on this as well. You said, you know, are we making it mean that we're not worthy? And that was certainly my experience. And again, I've spoken about it before, but I realized only in the last 12 months that I actually didn't like myself that much. I didn't feel like I deserved all these wonderful things I was dreaming about and putting on my vision board and journaling about and talking about. It was all fun. It was all okay, but I wasn't calling it in because right at the root of all of it, I didn't feel worthy of it. I didn't feel deserving. I had this belief right at the core that actually, no, that isn't what you deserve. And even if you get it, you're going to lose it. That was a massive thing for me. It was this belief that, you know, you might even achieve everything you want, but then you're going to screw it up because that's what you do. That's who you are. And I think that relates to what you just said. It's about this story that we put ourselves in. And it took a lot, you know, it wasn't just a case of when I realized that everything got better. It was like, oh, I see what I'm doing. I see this story that I've told myself.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's so interesting. And it's one of the main messages I wanted this podcast to get through to people, that, you know, you didn't deserve to be anxious. You didn't deserve to be depressed. You didn't deserve the things in your life that have made you feel sad. You don't deserve them. You deserve happiness. You deserve freedom. But maybe those things happened because they were there to teach you a lesson. And if you haven't come out of that yet, there is still something to learn, and you can choose to try and see what that is. But it does, it does require stepping up.
What you're talking about there is the law of universal assignments. So when we find ourselves in a repeating pattern, I know this is especially common with relationships, but even with jobs or with, you know, like taking that one step forward and feeling then like you take two steps back, that is usually a universal assignment. So that's the universe's way of trying to wake you up to your truth, to your soul purpose, to your life path. It's screaming at you, I will keep sending you this shit until you realize that you are stuck in your own energy and you need to break out of it, and that actually you've got work to do. You've got a soul purpose. You've got a life path. You're experiencing all of this because this ultimately becomes your story that you serve others with. But we have to wake up to that assignment. And I know for me, I was in 4 toxic relationships, one after the other, before I met my fiance. And just before I met Rick, I was in that place of, I've done it again. I've just gone and manifested an absolute a-hole. I don't want to swear on your podcast, but there are worse words I could use. I really had to look at what I was making that mean. And for me, I guess I'd been through so much toxicity in my business relationships and with my staff that I was then mirroring that in my personal relationships, because I guess I thought, well, if I'm going to get cheated on and scammed and betrayed in my business, then that's just who I am and that's what I do. This was on a really deep energetic level. So I mirrored the same thing in my personal relationships. And then once the business started kind of building itself up, and then I was in another toxic relationship, I recreated this whole other story that, oh, well, if business is going well and I've got it all good there, I can't possibly have it good at home. It's got to be one or the other. I can't have it all. I can't have it both. And it's like every layer we get through, we still create and recreate more stories until eventually I was on this mad spiritual path, and I came to the realization that we have two intentions. We have two reasons that we incarnate. The first, as I mentioned, is to have a human, physical, emotional experience. And the second reason is to serve the greatest, highest good of all, to raise the vibration of the planet for the collective consciousness. And we serve in so many different ways. Lily, you are serving, running this podcast. I serve as a coach and as a priestess and an energy healer. People serve as mothers, as doctors, as lawyers, as solicitors, as bank clerks. We serve in so many different ways. But when I suddenly started to see my role in this world, even with all my shit and even with all my baggage, as ultimately a service, that even if I only helped one person, even if that one person was just my brother, you know, nobody like mega or profound or, you know, even paying me money, then that somehow gave my life value. And this was then when I started to give myself value, because my life had value. And of course, we're not meant to be here to just pay bills and die, as the cliche goes. There is something far greater and something far more magical and powerful than we are. So I guess this was my first realization where I shifted. And then I started to look at all of my shit, forgive the word, as universal assignments, and started saying to myself, okay, what am I making this mean? What is the universe trying to teach me here? Where is my lesson? Where is my opportunity for growth? How do I turn this into a service? How do I take my story and how do I help other people with it? And you know, when we're in that really horrible manic depressive place, and I've been there, I was suicidal in my mid-20s, helping somebody else is just one of the easiest ways to get out of that vibration. If you can just get enough energy together to get yourself off the sofa, get yourself out of bed, and just walk across the street and knock on a neighbor's door and say, you know, can I cut your grass? Can I go to the shop for you? Can I, whatever? Or get on the phone to a friend and just say, hey, I'm feeling shit. I want to help you. Let me help you. Just talk to me about your life. Ring your mum. Mum, what can I do for you today? You know, go to the local pets and dogs place and, you know, offer to do some free dog walking or something. That energy of helping, that energy of feeling that we've got purpose, that energy of realizing that somewhere in this mess of things that we're thinking, there is an assignment there waiting for us, will really help you to shift. And as I said before, you know, honor the shift in the emotions. We don't have to leap straight to happiness and joy. We don't need to go skipping down happy lane with our voluntary dog walking, you know, but we can start to honor the shifting, and we can start to honor the universal truth around us. And you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said it's just creating that awareness. Awareness is half the battle. Once you're aware of the truth, once you are aware that there's options, once you are aware that you ultimately are the creator of your own life, then the magic really does start to happen, and the forgiveness will naturally, organically unfold.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So how could somebody find the value in what they're doing now, or in who they are now, if their reaction to what you just said was, I don't have any value? And I know so many people think that. They're like, oh, well, who am I? What have I got to offer? And I know I've spoken a lot about the power of even just sharing your story. So I encourage people that I work with to, you know, even just get into online communities or forums, or there was someone the other day and I said, why don't you start a blog? And they were like, because I don't want people to know what I'm going through. I'm like, right, so write under an alias name then, like do it anonymously. But in sharing, certainly for me, the minute I started sharing my struggle and not trying to be this kind of put together perfect, and I don't even know what I was aiming for. I don't even know why I thought that was necessary. But, you know, I did say to someone the other day, it's so funny, isn't it, that we all think we have to have ourselves put together. We all think we have to put this mask on for the world to say, yeah, I've got it all together and I know what I'm doing. And we're all doing it, and we're all a hot mess in the background. So yeah. I'm like a massive advocate for rip the mask off, show us your mess. Like, I feel better, actually. It sounds a bit sick in the head, but I do genuinely feel better. In fact, I've got a really good example. Even this morning, I watched, because I like to start my day with something that fills my mind. So I'll either read a bit of a book, or I'll watch a video, a motivational video, or I'll listen to a podcast or something to get me off on the right foot. And I was watching a coach, and usually this coach is, she kind of has this whole theme of not being all perfect, which is why I like her, because I see a lot of myself in her. So, you know, she'll just live stream from wherever, and, you know, a lot of what she does is quite undone. However, she still usually portrays this image of someone who has it all together. She has it all together spiritually. She has it all together with her money, and her business is doing really well. And I'd got this idea that she, you know, and she lives in this amazing place, and all of that. And yet her live stream this morning was from her car, because she was on the school run to pick up her kids. And I was like, oh my God, she's a normal person. Thank God for that. Like, she's achieved all this. It hasn't taken away anything that I admire about her. It's just now I see more of myself. It's like, oh, thank God for that. She's late for the school run, so she's live streaming from her car. Now I can relate to that. Like, now I feel like that is something I could achieve. And so I think, you know, we spend so much energy trying to kind of pack it all up and say to people, oh, no, I'm okay, I'm fine. You know, like, even thought this morning, I walked into school and one of the mums was like, hi Lily, how are you? I was like, yeah, I'm really good. And in my head I was like, no, you're not. You feel like crap. You've had no sleep. You're heavily pregnant. You're full of cold. But then I laughed, because I thought, you know, she'd never asked if I reeled all that off to her. But it is this default setting where we just go, I'm fine. Everything's okay. Yeah. And so I encourage people to, you know, share a little bit of your mess, even if you can't share it. You know, and people get all hung up on that, and that's the ego again that you were talking about before. There's a fear of doing that, because they think, you know, oh, I can't share that because I'll be judged, or I can't share that because someone will think less of me, or I'll offend somebody, or, you know, there's a whole list of reasons. But there is always a way, and even just getting it out in a journal is sharing it, and at that point you're sharing it with yourself. But I think as soon as it's written down, it's out of your subconscious, and it's in a place, like you say, it brings a level of awareness. So you can write in a journal, you know, the most negative thing, like, I feel crap today, and, you know, today's gone well, and I'm useless, and I'm hopeless, and blah, 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 blah. You could write all of that, but then when you're reading it in black and white, a little part of you will be like, am I useless? You know, really? That's quite harsh. Maybe I'm not completely useless. Maybe in that scenario I was, but I can find another scenario where I wasn't. And I think the awareness is a huge, huge thing, because it's like a little knock at the door, isn't it? The minute you consciously become aware of something, it's like, hello, let me in. Like, oh, this little inkling of an idea you just had, or this little realization isn't going to go away. And, you know, it's so interesting, because I know I dealt with this, and I speak to so many people that deal with the same thing, where they will stop themselves from doing anything that might help. Isn't it funny that we just, like, there is this beating up of ourselves, and we feel like we don't deserve to even feel better about this. So, you know, I spoke to somebody only yesterday, and I knew there was a podcast episode I put out previously that would help them, and I know they listened to the podcast. So I said, did you listen to that episode? They were like, oh no, I couldn't listen to that one. And I was like, that is unbelievable, because they loved the podcast, they listened to every episode, and it got to the one that they really needed to hear, and they got a few minutes in and were like, oh no, I can't listen to that. It was like, they were like, oh no, and they wouldn't have realised this was their thought process, but it was almost like, if I listen to that, then I might feel better about it, and that's not okay. I'm not allowed to feel better about this. I have to stay in the struggle. And I, you know, it comes back to that ego thing and that fear thing, but certainly something that came up for me in my journaling in the last year, which was something I wasn't even aware was a thing for me, was that, you know, I don't know who I am if I'm not struggling. And it was so profound when it came out, because I didn't think about it. It just came out in journaling one day. And I think I was challenging myself. I was sort of asking myself questions like, how do you feel? Why do you feel like that? okay, why do you feel like that? Okay, why do you feel like that? And I kept asking the same question to dig it up. And out of nowhere, I wrote down, because I don't know who I am if I'm not struggling with this. It's just gone 11:11 on my clock, by the way. If anyone's into angel numbers, you'll know how significant that is. I freaking love it. I see ones all the time. But anyway, yeah, and it was a bit like a slap round the face, because I was like, oh shit, as much as I'm uncomfortable here, and as much as I'm completely miserable at times, I'm still choosing to stay here because I don't know who I am without it. And it was that identity thing, you know, again, it's what you went back to right at the start when you said that we create these stories and then we attach our identity to those stories. And, you know, as much as you might see that, you know, say for example, someone who's had a horrible run of relationships, or, you know, like toxic relationships and very unhappy time, you know, they think that their goal is to find someone who's going to make them happy and to be in a relationship that's easy and all of those wonderful things. But energetically, they're scared because at some point they thought that about the other relationships and they turned out to be wrong. So they actually then stop themselves from calling that in because they think, well, at least without, I can't lose, you know, at least if I have nothing, you can't take it away from me. And I think that was so powerful for me to realise that that's how I was thinking. And I chose in that moment, oh, okay, well, I don't choose that anymore. I actually choose to trust that I can change this around and that the same thing doesn't have to keep happening, but maybe I need to look at my habits that I'm in and my reactions to things and just, you know, just the things that I do without even thinking. Maybe there's a little tweak I can make, you know, it's like one step in a different direction can completely change everything. So, it's so interesting. And it's a funny thing. It's, you know, we do a lot of these podcast episodes about different things, but this same topic keeps coming up, that it's about choice and that it's about ultimately, and I hate to say it, but it comes down to us, doesn't it? You know, ultimately you could coach with the best coaches, you could take the best programs, you could do the best journaling exercise, you could literally dedicate 25 years of your life to living with monks who live in peace, and the truth is none of that's going to make a damn bit of difference until you realize that it starts from you. And you said it yourself, you know, you help people with energy healing, but actually they can do it themselves. It's just that most people don't feel they can, or they don't allow themselves to do it, and
they've forgotten their power.
It's and I love that, and I really want you to hear this. If you're listening to this podcast episode and feeling a little bit lost with it all, thinking, holy crap, I thought this was an anxiety podcast and these people are talking about priestesses and light and grids and God knows what, but you know, this is whether you know, whatever you believe in, whatever your faith is based in, I think religion is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, because actually when you dig into all of that, we're all saying the same thing. And you can read any religious book and it will all say, they will all talk about forgiveness, they will all talk about the power of who you are as a soul. And you know, and that's really what I want to drive home. And I just think, you know, some people will listen to this and they'll just switch it off and they'll completely disregard it and never come back to it. And that's cool, that's fine. That, you know, it is your choice. But I'm hoping for some people, and I'm sure for some people, this is just going to have lit a spark in their head to be like, oh, you know. And so a really powerful question I would like to put to everyone is, if your reaction to something is, oh, that's bollocks, or, you know, that can't be true, so then ask yourself, but what if it was? Just for fun. Let's just have some fun for a minute. You know, kids do this all the time. Like, but what if it was true? Because actually, you know, I might die whenever my time comes and find out that everything I preached about my entire life was a load of rubbish. If that happens, then I don't care, because I'm having a wonderful time while I'm living in all of my faith and belief. Like, you know, I'm having a party down here. So I actually think it doesn't really matter if I get there and find out I was wrong. I'll be like, oh, well, never mind. And then I'll probably get put in a pod and sent back down, and there'll be a whole bunch more lessons to learn. But
absolutely,
I love that question, you know, if you say, oh, it's not possible, I love following up with, but what if it was?
Yeah.
Or I can't do that, but what if I could?
Yeah.
Or, you know, that isn't, I don't know, you get what I mean? Like, but any time you say you can't, or you shouldn't, or you won't, or anything like that, follow it up with, but what if I could? Or what if I should? Or what if that was real? Because, you know, kids live their whole life like that. Look how happy they are.
Absolutely. Because they don't have the filter of fear that we carry as adults.
No, they've not, and you know, it does, experience can be a wonderful thing, and it can also be a very shaping thing. And, you know, when we have a good experience of something, it expands us, and we're able to kind of draw on that next time. But similarly, if we have a negative experience, we learn from that too, and then this is what creates these blocks and these beliefs. And, you know, if I could get one message out to people worldwide, you know, I feel like there should be some motivational music playing now while I speak, but if I could tell you one thing, it's that you're infinitely powerful.
Yeah.
You truly have no idea what you can create in your life. And I think it starts with that question, what if I can?
Yeah.
So, and I think everyone can start there. I don't think it matters, you know, what you're going through currently, how low you feel. If you can just ask yourself, what if? You know, what if you didn't wake up tomorrow and be riddled with anxiety? What if it was completely different? And then you'll go, oh, but I will be. Yeah, but what if you weren't? And keep going, but what if, but what if, but what if? Like, my kids do it all the time. My kids are 5 and 6, and that's what they do. Like, you know, oh, can I have an ice cream? No. Oh, but what if I have this? No. Oh, yeah, but what if we have, you know, it's like, we're programmed to think like that. We just get out of that habit. So, you know, if you want a fun exercise, everyone listening, even for the next hour, every time you have a negative thought in your head, if you then follow up with, oh, but what if? And then finish that with something positive, just see where your mind allows you to go. And that in itself will start to shift you up that energetic scale, because, you know, feeling like you can't and then moving into feeling like maybe you could, you've just shifted energetically. Your vibration's just gone up.
Yeah.
And when your vibration goes up, you align with other things that are vibrating at that frequency. So then ideas come to you, and opportunities come to you, and all kinds of doors start opening that were always open, but you didn't see them because you weren't looking at that level. You were looking at the level below. And it's crazy, crazy, crazy how it happens. But it's happened for me. It's happened for people I've worked with. It's happened for the countless mentors that I watch and that I read about and listen to. And I don't believe anyone here is more deserving than another. I don't feel like anyone here, I hate when I say this because I always have to back it up with a contradictory term. I was about to say nobody here is special. Obviously we're all special, you're all beautiful. But what I mean by that is, you know, Richard Branson isn't some preordained kind of god of, you know, marketing who got a sprinkle of fairy dust and therefore he gets to have a multi-billion-dollar company and Necker Island. He is just someone who went, what if I can? You know? I mean, the story of how his airline started was all because he was queuing up, I think it was for BA, it might not have been BA, but it was another airline. And I think there were delays, and then when he got on the plane, it was dingy and the seat was small and the food was crap. And, you know, and most people would just go, oh, well, that was a shit flight, and leave it at that. Richard Branson went home and went, what if I made my own airline? What would that be like? I'm going to write that down. And then he wrote a list of all the things he would do differently. He was like, I would have mood lighting to make people feel relaxed. I would have bigger seats to sit in. I would have nice food that tastes good. I wouldn't have grumpy staff. I would have staff that have smiles on their faces. And then from that, he was like, what if I actually could create this? And boom, he's got Virgin. And obviously it didn't happen like that. You know, as far as I can tell, there was probably an element of effort that went into it. But it all stemmed from an idea of what if I had my own airline? So, you know, try the what if question and see how that works for you. So, Harriette, this has been amazing. if you could, so I've just sort of shared something I would like to everyone to understand, but if you had, I'm going to give you the megaphone now, and if you had the ability to reach every anxiety sufferer in the world, what would your inspirational message to them be? What is it that you want them to know in their heart and soul?
I think you've already said it, so I'm just gonna back you up and re-say it. It's remember that you are infinitely powerful, and that you have a life path, and you have a soul purpose, and all that is required of you right now is to consider that question.
Yeah.
Of who are you?
Yeah. And I really, really want you to do that. You know, I'm challenging everyone listening, because I know it, because I've been there myself. I know people will hear that and go, oh, I'm no one, because you know, you'll list a bunch of things that you think are just generic and that you think are just things that everybody does. But please don't discount anything that you do. Every single thing you do matters. From even getting up in the morning to breathing in and out. By breathing in and out, you are bringing something to this world. You really are. And, you know, with every action you take, so I know, you know, I'm a mum, I'm about to be a mum again. For mums, it's so easy just to go, oh, you know, I don't bring value to anything. All I do is the school run, and I, you know, clean the kids' clothes, and I take them on outings, and, you know, you're forming entire human beings for the next generation.
Absolutely.
If that isn't a frigging, like, epic job, I don't know what is. And if you don't have children, even if you're living on your own, and, you know, even if you're living on your own and you don't have a job, and maybe you have a place and maybe it isn't yours, like, if you could just list all these things that go, oh yeah, but I don't have a job, oh yeah, I'm in a place but it isn't mine. Even by breathing in and out, you guys are bringing immense value to this world. And I want you to look at the things that you do day to day. And, you know, even if all you do is get up and watch TV, you're feeding your mind in that moment. That means you have the power to feed your mind. Now, you might be feeding your mind with something right now that doesn't serve you, but you could easily switch the channel. You could easily feed your mind with something that does serve you, or instead of TV, listen to an audiobook that's inspiring or motivating. Like, as easily as you can as easily as you can click the controller to change the channel, you can do the same thing in your life as well. Stop telling yourself that you don't matter. Stop telling yourself that you're not valuable and that you don't have anything to bring, because it just isn't possible. You wouldn't be here otherwise, which is the whole point Harriette was making earlier. And if you think that's rubbish, then ask yourself, what if it's not? Just for fun, just for the next 5 minutes, what if I'm completely right? You could be the next thought leader. You could be the next trailblazer. You could be the next Richard Branson. That, you know, with this epic thing to do, but, you know, you're telling yourself that you're not, you know. And you've only got to look at Richard Branson's backstory. I think he's dyslexic. I think he failed school. I don't think he did college. He got, you know, there were people that tried to give him a story all the way along. Oprah's another one. Go and check out Oprah's backstory. These people have not had it on a silver platter. These people, you know, they did not fly in on a cloud of gold going, oh, life gets to be easy for me. It's just at some point they made that switch and they were like, what if that isn't my life? What if that's not how I'm going to be? So, you know, just challenge yourself to do that, if nothing else. Absolutely. So, Harriette, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
What I'd love to do, I don't know if you have anything that could link to it, but I would love to link to a visual of the energetic scale that you mentioned, because I've heard of that before, and I found that really useful, because again, we put ourselves under a lot of pressure, and we sometimes think that we have to go from being depressed to happy, and that's all there is. But seeing it written down in that way, like you say, you know, if you're depressed, then maybe it can just come into active anger. You know, maybe you don't have to be skipping down a rainbow. Maybe you just get to shift into a different vibration, and then it's incremental from there. So if there's anything visual that we could link to, that would be awesome. So we'll try and set that up in the notes as well.
Yeah, no, there is one in my Facebook group.
Perfect. And what is your Facebook group? That's a good link.
It's the Ask Harriette Club. So if you go to Facebook and just type in Ask Harriette Club, it's a free Facebook group where I do regular free sessions, giving advice. There's loads of resources in there, helpful stuff, including that emotional scale. There's a visual of that in there in the files section.
Perfect. So that was going to be my next question. If people have questions, and I'm sure they must have questions about this, how can they reach out? So obviously there's that Facebook group, which we'll link to. How else could somebody get hold of you if they wanted to work with you or connect with you? How would they do that?
Just head over to my website, askharriette.co.uk. And if you want to do a /freebies on the end of that URL, there is a whole page full of downloadable freebies and free sessions and advice bits, resources, all kind of things. It's all on the website, so go fill your boots of goodies.
Fill your boots.
From Ask Harriette Land, and I will be there, askharriette.co.uk.
Perfect. And I just want to say, obviously Harriette's just given you those links. That is an opportunity to do something a little bit different. So if you're someone who usually listens to these things, gets all fired up, all inspired, and then turns it off and then goes back to your day, and then, a month later you're like, oh, I'm still here, then go right now to those links and get those freebies. Just do something that's a little bit different to what you would normally do. And I promise it will snowball. It just creates more and more of the same thing. And it becomes a bit of a fun game. I'm in this at the moment for myself. It's like, I'm really happy with who I am now. I've done a lot of the work and I'm feeling really kind of content with where I've got to. But now it's become fun for me. So it's like, oh, okay. So, what could I do differently today? What would my habit normally be? And how can I change that? What's that going to bring in? Make it fun, like bring the fun back. That's what I say.
Absolutely.
Fun and sunshine is what we all need.
Love it.
Awesome stuff. So as I said, we will link to all of that in the podcast notes. So do reach out. And also I will be inviting Harriette to join the Confidence Academy podcast Facebook group. I need a shorter name, like that, literally trip over that every single time. But Harriette, we'll get you in there because then if anybody wants to tag you in anything in there or ask questions, they can do.
Of course,
and
amazing.
I'd also really love to do something. It was a new idea that came up recently and we haven't truly got underway with it yet, but I would love to start doing more interactive things in that Facebook group as well. So I've started suggesting to my guest experts that we collaborate in some way to bring something to the masses. So we'll bash heads and see if we can come up with some even if it's just a live Q&A where people can come on, or maybe it would be fun if there was some kind of group healing session that you could do that people, because I think, with energy work, it frightens people. If they haven't done it before, if they haven't heard of it before, it can be a little bit frightening for them because they're like, wait a minute, what? She's going to do what with my aura? Like, I don't know how I feel about that. So,
you're in safe hands, I promise.
So I think it would be really nice if we did some kind of collaborative session where people can they could even just watch it and just go, oh, okay, that's how it works, that's what it is, and take what they will from that. But if you're up for that, we'll set that up as well.
Sure.
Woo woo! Well, thank you ever so much.
My pleasure.
To everyone listening as well, thank you again for tuning in. I will be back with now an episode every Tuesday as well as every Friday. So look out for the Let's Talk Tuesday episodes that now happen. If you have any questions or topics that you would like me to cover on a Tuesday episode, you can reach me at lilybagcock@gmail.com or on my website, lilybagcock.com. All of the links are in the notes as per usual. And I will be back really, really soon with another episode and of course with another amazing guest expert. But for now, I just want to say again a huge thank you to Harriette Hale for giving us her gorgeous energy this morning and for sharing all of that wisdom. And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. And remember, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.
And that's us done for another episode. I hope you're now feeling uplifted, inspired and motivated and ready to start making those positive changes starting today? If so, you can connect with me and my guest experts over in the Confidence Academy Facebook group. We will support you and cheer you on every step of the way and help to hold you accountable as you create your epic life. You will find all of the relevant links in the podcast notes. And if you love this podcast series and you'd like to support it further, then please visit www.patreon.com and find out how you can score some additional training and resources by becoming a patron of the show. Your support means I can dedicate more time to finding the very best experts to share their valuable knowledge and stories. You can support the show from as little as $1 a month, so do please click the link if you can help. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have any feedback for the show or suggestions about future topics you'd like me to cover, please get in touch. In the meantime, I'll be back soon with another new episode and another amazing guest expert. But until then, look after yourself, dream big, and live bigger. And remember, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it.